welcome to Giants Latest. We do have a slight update on Aaron Rodgers, and I know that we are all so sick of talking about him, so I'll make this very quick. The Vikings are out on Aaron Rodgers, which is probably a surprise to no one at this point because there has been no update, it seems like, from the Vikings until now that he's even really been in the consideration. So, what we do know is that, surprise, surprise, it's still between the Steelers and the Giants. And I saw a report today that said that the Giants are giving Aaron Rodgers his time to decide. And I think we all know at this point how I feel about that. For those of you who don't and are new, just know that I am so sick of Aaron Rodgers, and at this point, I don't want him anywhere near the organization because he is a clown and turning free agency into his show. And if he wants to be on TV and he wants to make it about himself, he can stick with the Netflix documentaries. Let's move along. Are the Giants desperate to sign a veteran quarterback? In my opinion, yes. And I think that everyone who's a Giants fan would probably agree with that at this point where things have gone, because they are bending over backwards to accommodate Aaron Rodgers. And even though they've had three other quarterbacks in the building, three other pretty good veteran quarterbacks who, let's be honest, are going to win about as many games as Aaron Rodgers is with this team and coaching staff. But they have had all of these veterans in the building. I don't think that they would even be considering someone like Joe Flacco or Jameis Winston if they weren't very serious about having a vet quarterback. And Joe Schoen has talked ad nauseum about this. We know that they really want a veteran quarterback. So yes, of course they're desperate. Tommy DeVito is the only one on the roster. Like, the only way that there's one way that could prove to me that they are the most desperate out of any team in the league for a quarterback, and that would be bringing in Carson Wentz. And this is not an idea, Giants. Do not listen to this. Do not do this. If anyone happens to catch wind of this, I'm not suggesting this is a good idea. But I'm just they are so desperate for a veteran quarterback. And the problem that I have is that because they're giving Aaron Rodgers so much time, we already know that some of the veteran quarterbacks have met with other teams. There is a possibility that Russ Wilson is going to go to the Browns. And then we know that the Vikings want a veteran quarterback. Maybe they're going to consider someone like Joe Flacco. The Steelers, if, Rodgers doesn't end up going there, which I think he's going to end up going there. But then, if he goes to the Steelers, then the Giants have Jameis Winston, which I guess is fine. We're talking about a stopgap 1-year veteran quarterback, but I just think the fact that they are really allowing Aaron Rodgers to do whatever he wants just proves to me two things. Number one, they are so desperate to have Aaron Rodgers in here because they think that he is so much better than any of the other veteran quarterbacks available. And number two, they most definitely got a win mandate from John Mara, because if they didn't feel like Aaron Rodgers was that much better than those other veteran quarterbacks and he was going to win the Giants that many more games, then they would say, go to the Steelers, have fun, we're out, and we're moving on. And I have a problem with that. And I have a problem with the fact that this is what the front office decided, that they're keeping they're keeping Joe Schoen. John Mara is keeping Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. And now they have to win now, which is a joke and wildly unfair to them. I get it, they're in year 4, but to say you have to win now, has anyone seen the NFC East and looked at our team compared to theirs? We don't even have a quarterback, and we might even miss out on a quarterback, one of the top 2 in the draft for the second year in a row, even though we sucked this year. It's honestly unbelievable. So anyway, I'm just disappointed that this is where we're at. It just kind of feels like we're redoing the cycle that we did last year, except I think the only hope for a lot of us at this point is that, I don't know if it's even a hope, it's just reality that this year is probably going to be pretty bad, and then we're going to have a high draft picks next year and probably a new GM, and it's just why did we even bother, But it is what it is. We will see what happens. I honestly very much believe that the Giants are desperate for a veteran quarterback. They'll get one at some point. Time will tell when that will be. So speaking of the Giants in free agency, how would I grade what they have done so far? So here's how I feel. I feel ultimately they deserve a B-, and I'm going to tell you why. Number one is there were 2 positions that I so desperately wanted the Giants to go after in free agency, and they did both of those things. Number 1 was a cornerback, and number 2 was a right guard. Now, I don't know why it has not publicly been announced that they officially re-signed Greg Van Roten, but it has been reported by multiple beat writers, especially Giants beat writers. It was reported by a ton of outlets. So it's coming. I don't know what the holdup is, unless there is some change there. If they don't end up signing Van Roten, I expect them to go after a different right guard, and Brandon Scherf and Dalton Reisner and a couple others are still available. So I expect them to do that. So based on the information that we have, I would say I'm happy that they signed those two players. And I do think that they brought good enough players in. Like, I don't think Greg Van Roten is anything to write home about, and he's not my favorite option for the right guard, but I think he's serviceable, and I think we will have continuity on the offensive line for the first time in a long time. So I am semi-happy about that. Paulson Adebo, thrilled with, I think is a great signing. I also really like Javon Holland, a guy that I didn't think they would go after. I didn't think they were going to go after a safety at all. I heard that after things didn't work out with Will Freeze and he ended up going to another team, that's when they pivoted and went to Holland, which I think was a good signing. So I do like those signings. I like some of the depth signings that they made. I think that obviously this team has really struggled with depth, and I think Joe has kind of neglected that over the years, or he thought that, you know, he could hit on players in the draft, and obviously the first two drafts were not the most successful. So when you have bad drafts and you don't have great free agencies and you don't have a ton of money to spend, obviously depth is going to be a problem. So I will say that's probably overall why I give him a B-. Obviously the quarterback situation is a problem. I give them an F, like with the quarterback. That's an outlier. It is affecting the whole grade, but it's not, you know, we're curving the thing a little bit. But ultimately, like I said, I like the depth. I'm glad that they're bringing in some special teamers. We had a couple issues here and there last year with some concerns on special teams, especially when it comes to tackling and things like that. So overall, I think it was a decent free agency. I don't think it was amazing. I don't think it was awful. I think it was above average. I think they did a decent job of bringing in need, depth, and I will say I do really like the contracts. No one was wildly overpaid. We're not going into debt. You know, I will say I will give Joe credit for that because he was asked about this right after the season ended, like, you know, are you basically going to pull a Dave Gettleman and sign all of these massive contracts to try to save your job? And he said he wasn't going to, but you never know. And I'm glad that he didn't up until this point. Now, if he signs Aaron Rodgers to $50 million a year for 2 years, we will have a different conversation, you and I. But until then, I think he's done a good job. And like I said, I like the contracts. They're basically all 3 years. So you have these guys for a couple years to really learn the system and hopefully grow with the team. And some of them are even 2 years. The third year is not even guaranteed. So I like the structure. I like the contracts. So overall, good for now. Let's see about the quarterback position. So speaking of, let's talk about Dart versus Milroe, because obviously we've talked a lot about Ward versus Sanders. We're going to continue until the draft to talk a lot about all of these quarterbacks, but today is when Milroe is actually doing his pro day at Alabama. So I want to talk about that a little bit because he ran the 4.4 a couple times, and his last time was a 4.37. The guy is fast as lightning. There's no denying that. And I think that his speed is obviously going to be something that makes him really enticing to a lot of different teams. I personally think that when you look at someone like Jalen Milroe and you look at what he's capable of, and you think that if he can really get his passing under control and he can focus on fixing the inconsistencies, you have to think, like, does he have the potential to be like Lamar Jackson? He's never going to be Lamar Jackson. I'm not making that. I'm saying there is the potential to look at him and say, with the speed, with the fact that he is so quick to run and he's a really capable runner and he can take off and he's fast. Like, he is someone who is really going to be able to be decisive when it comes to running. And I think he's someone who can really excel in Daboll's offense. So I think from that perspective, and from the fact that, you know, Daboll is this quarterback whisperer, so they say, I like to think that if they bring in someone like Milroe, that Daboll's experience is going to help bring in or help fix the inaccuracies and the inconsistencies that Milroe has. He's young, he's raw. I think those are the type of things that can be fixed, especially with someone like Daboll. Someone like Dart, I think, is obviously a little bit more consistent. He's a little bit better, I think, with the accuracy, not as many overthrows, things like that. He's done well in the Ole Miss system. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he has a lot to learn. I think he also would do well in Daboll's system. I just personally feel like, based on Daboll's experience and what he's done with quarterbacks, that Milroe might be a better fit, and where he wants to go with the quarterback position with the Giants, I get the vibe that they would go more after Milroe. He also has the Alabama connection, which makes me feel like that. You know, we talked a lot about Saban and things like that. And, you know, Saban loved his Tyler Newman pick last year. So there's some things like that that just make me think that Milroe might be the better fit. And I think that whether you get Milroe or Dart, you're not throwing them into the woods this year, which is, I think, the theory why they're really, giving Aaron Rodgers his time, because he can play for the full year, and then you can give, Dart and Milroe a full year to sit and soak it in and see how they do next year. So what do you guys think? Who is the better fit for the Giants? Is it Dart or Milroe? Let me know in the comments, and I will be back with more Giants latest. Make sure you hit subscribe.